You are watching the best of The Alex Jones Show, weekdays from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. Central. Watch live at Infowars.com/show or become a member of InfoWarsNews.com and help us take resistance to the next level.
Dr. Doug Rockey is our guest. Shifting gears then to what you were wanting to talk about and what I wanted to get you on about, Fukushima and the same story, oh, it's not a big deal, and then not even helping the people that were on the ships or on the ground who are all getting incredibly sick on record.
Yeah, the Fukushima thing, when that first started, when that happened, I was in the War Injuries Clinic, #1 clinic for health effects on my team, in Washington, D.C., with the #1 doctors in the U.S. Department of Veteran Affairs. And they're sitting there looking. It's all here. It's all here. Everything you said is all here. Wait a minute. You're teaching us, and we're supposed to be taking care of you. So when this was all happening there, I'm standing there and I say, we need to take care of these people immediately. We need to provide them the mandatory radio bioassays and look at this stuff, for which we have the document. Here's the orders. Who wrote them? They look at, yeah, Doug, you did, didn't you? Yeah, I go, yeah, how about that? Why aren't you taking care of those people? Now, as you mentioned, they talked about potassium iodide. That's irrelevant. The only thing that does is it blocks the absorption of iodine-131, the radioactive iodide, into the body. Okay.
Exactly. That's not good when you're right up against the actual hot radiation like in Fukushima.
But the radiation is still zapped your butt and it's still in the body. So just because the thyroid doesn't absorb that one, it's already in the body, it's already there, so the damage is done. It's sort of like you turn the light on. Once the light comes off, you turn the light on, your body is hurt. But then you have all of the incredible particulates and contamination. So when all that happened, I literally contacted the Navy, the Ronald Reagan, because I got their emails and everything, said, this is what you need to do. Here are the regulations mandated for training, mandated for environmental remediation, mandated for decontamination.
And it's a nuclear-powered carrier, so they should know to follow their own rules.
Correct. I've crawled all over that carrier. I mean, personally, I've crawled all over that carrier. I mean, I haven't been down in the reactor department, but I've been all over it. And the thing is, you're so warned of all things. So all this contamination was brought in. So they were less than a mile offshore at the reactor. All the stuff came in. Now, all the people are sick. Now, the medical care should be provided, and it should have been done day one, but they didn't do it because they can't acknowledge it. Now, the question that's come up, and the latest information I got from some of the sailors that have called here and the parents that have called here, is the question is whether or not the Ronald Reagan needs to be totally scrapped as a ship because of the extensive contamination. Now, what we learned from the research I did both in Iraq, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, but more important, at the Nevada test site, Mercury, Nevada, for the Department of Energy, Department of Defense, Geiger counters don't work. And you can take all day long, and you're not going to find the contamination because of the way it works. And that's why so many people are sick. So when you look at the health effects on all of us and everybody else, and all the Iraqis, and everybody else have been contaminated, the guys in Somalia, the Balkans, all over the place, Vieques, Puerto Rico. Hawaii is a nightmare on the main island of Hawaii and Oahu from DU. And you see the health effects are absolutely what's listed in the official VA document.
So what should happen to the Ronald Reagan?
Pardon?
Well, what should happen to the Ronald Reagan then?
Well, the Ronald Reagan, what should have happened right off the bat is the ship should have been pulled and decontaminated if they could even do it. The other thing, too, is they got to get bioassays of medical care based on the signs and symptoms all the sailors are having.
Well, this is the big issue I want to ask you then, and this is the crux of it. The troops have been treated like worse than birdcage liner for a long time, but undoubtedly the last few decades it's gotten even worse. The attitude with the deadly dust on 9/11 that they knew was deadly and they decided to cover up because they didn't want to admit it was deadly. With the DU, with Fukushima, with things that are in vaccines and things that are in drugs. I mean, even in the 60s, if a drug was hurting people, they would recall it. I've read it. I've studied it. They weren't perfect then, but there were a lot of recalls. Now they'll recall something if it's petty and doesn't matter, but if it's really big, they'll just ignore it and keep going ahead with it. So what I'm asking you is, what is the cultural change, or has it always been there, to absolutely not care about human life and just contaminate everything, and is it getting worse?
It's greed. I mean, it's greed and money and control and power. I mean, look at everything that's happened throughout the Middle East and now into the Soviet Union and the Ukraine. All of this is about control of resources, control of terrain, control of pipeline things to get it over. Who's going to control what? I mean, we're looking at all the stuff in Syria. That's all about the pipeline coming out of Iraq and everything, in Iran across through Syria out to the coast. And they've got to get that all stuff, so Assad doesn't want to go along with the same thing of what happened in Afghanistan, what's happened in Iraq. We're seeing it happen in Ukraine. So you've got all the powers that be that want to control everything, but they disregard the health and environmental effects of their military operations. It's sort of like, I mean, with the U.S. military, how many nations have we attacked and invaded now since I joined the military in '67? How many countries have we destroyed? How much have we contaminated? How many people have got sick and died? Not from the actual combat operations, from the toxic exposures. It's in the millions in the U.S. military. And now you've got all of the health effects on the civilians. It's sort of like right here in Chanute Air Force Base, Rantoul, Illinois. The trichloroethylene is off base into the water supplies. The houses where we know the contamination is based, and you got the report, you got the map showing it. They took the people off the map so they don't show up in any map, anything. You won't find it unless you go look for the house, and then they disavow any contamination in the water supply, even though it's on their own report that confirms it. It's staggering. And then anybody that tries to speak up, like the reporters or myself or anybody, boy, watch out. You're not going to be able to buy groceries in town.
We're going to put that map up. We have it on screen of the contamination there. Just an example of this attitude. And now under Homeland Security rules, they want to make it illegal to expose toxic waste dumping if it's done by a, quote, infrastructure-protected corporation or government group. And I don't get where all these elites think their kids are going to grow up when they could care less about the world. I mean, I think you're right. I think it's a greed-based, decadent disconnect by the ruling class worldwide, kind of like the Soviets would throw nuclear reactors in a lake, too lazy to even bury it, or TEPCO would just have bulldozers lightly bury fuel rods that were ejected 2 miles into farmers' fields. It just seems like an absolute total laziness. I mean, if I got a fuel rod, I would be put in prison as a terrorist. Or if they caught me burying a fuel rod on my property, I'd get 100 years in jail under laws. But when government or corporations do it, it's just like, so what? The globalists have controlled the mainstream media for a long time, but now they're expanding, making the weaponization even more vicious and deceptive. All the major networks are state-run.
We are partnering this year with the NFL.
The NFL has become a political weapon against the Second Amendment and pushes Obamacare. MSNBC tells us that our children belong to the state.
We have to break through our kind of private idea that kids belong to their parents or kids belong to their families and recognize that kids belong to whole communities.
The brainwashing media machine has been turned up on high, and it's time for humanity to double down on the true people's media and strike back against the tyrants that are destroying our civilization with their lies and fraud. We are the resistance. You are the resistance. You are the info war. It is more important than ever to realize that we are not the alternative media. We are the true media. The establishment dinosaur press is dying.
We are in an information war, and we are losing that war.
Join us at InfoWarsNews.com and PrisonPlanet.tv. Members can share their memberships with up to 11 people. By subscribing, you will literally be buying war bonds in the info war to expand our operation in the face of the tyrants. Join us at PrisonPlanet.tv.